You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 22 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can. Whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level, I am Sarah.
I'm Rob, I think.
It's been a rough week.
It's been like a rough, since last Wednesday, yeah, since 1 week ago, it's been rough. It's been weird shit's happened. Like, people got injured and...
the toilet incident.
The plumbing and all kinds of stuff. It was people were sick. I mean, it was just none of the shit I wanted. So,
well, let's look on the bright side. We've got Kate's feeling better this week.
We do.
So apparently the NyQuil shots worked. Woot woot.
Yes, it did.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll call those NyQuil.
Right.
We're not sure what they were, but they were NyQuil.
Jim Beam makes NyQuil now?
Apparently they
I'm
do.
still asleep.
That's fair.
We're here in the studio recording another episode of our podcast.
Episode 22.
We got to play some D&D last week.
We did.
Sadly, we didn't get to play Mouse Guard because my brain exploded.
You know what?
It's
fine. We'd also like to welcome Knox. We hear you. We see you in live show chat. So welcome to live show chat, because you can do that. That's what you get with Patreon.
That is a Patreon thing.
All right. So we have a whole topic to go over. We finally shifted out of the oddities.
Yep.
And moved into geography. Which, honestly, is okay.
Yeah, it's here's the thing: it's an interesting topic, but I think a lot of the discussion tonight is going to center around what you don't need to do, and not what you do need to do.
I think you put it really good at dinner, because I will flat out say, audience, I did not prepare for this show. I was like, geography, and I've got all this stuff going on, and she's just like, don't worry about it, I got this. And I read it, I'm like, this is all great stuff, but the one thing that sticks in my head is this is like not that important. And then I thought about what you said at dinner, and I was like, you're right. Whenever you think about D&D, or you think about a game, where you've got minis and people marching all over the place, you think of maps. And you think of how cool it is to have maps and stuff. And there's these epic terrain building programs where you can make awesome looking maps and like campaign cartographer kind of stuff. And then in the end, when you get to doing it, you're like, where do I put crap?
Yeah.
And I think what it comes right down to is it doesn't really matter. Like, that's cool stuff for later. But I think initially it really doesn't matter all that much. I mean, in the case of some game systems, like Urban Shadows, you build the world together.
Yeah.
You literally make a map together to know where certain haunts are, but the locations are scene based. You're not traveling from location to location.
Exactly. And Dungeon World even says in its manual there, leave. It's like it's almost a rule. Like it says leave blank spots on the map, because you'll decide what happens as the story goes, and you've got this nice big blank spot. And okay, well, what's there? What do we need to be there? An ice castle?
Something.
Of the Ice Queen? Sure. Okay, that's what's there now. Great. Awesome.
Yeah. Build out from where you start. So let's hit through this and then hit some questions, because I'm kind of in the mood to answer questions today.
Yeah. All right. So when you're talking about geography, so like I said earlier, a lot of this discussion is going to be about what you don't need to do.
Correct.
Okay, it's about limiting yourself, because when we're talking about physical geography of world building, okay, that's literally everything. And when you're getting going with your world building and such like that, and you start thinking about your geography, it can get very overwhelming very quick to think, oh God, I have to map all of this stuff. I need to know what every nook and every cranny of this world and possibly other worlds even looks like. And you see all these great elaborate maps, especially like if you watch Critical Role, they've got these really professionally done maps of the different regions and whatnot and stuff like that.
Because they have artists.
You crack open your guide to the Sword Coast, and it's got this beautiful map of Faerun
Which is
there,
awesome.
and all sorts of roads and forests and little settlements. And oh look, there's Neverwinter, and oh look, there's Baldur's Gate, and oh look, there's Waterdeep, and it can be very overwhelming and very intimidating.
And then on the other side of that, you've got like one link that I threw up, which was it's a guy who literally does it by astrometrics. Like he's like, oh, you want 2 suns. Okay, well, let's do some math to figure out what the story of your world is. And he literally maths out how that's possible. And then from that could figure out what the mass of the world was. And then based on the mass, that told us how much water and how much heavy metals and what kind of resources. Okay, so now we know the resources. We can say, obviously, advanced civilizations could come out of this because there's lots of resources on this. And it was like, well, that's a lot to think about that you just came up with the fact of 2 suns and a temperate world.
Yeah,
that's great.
I don't have an astrophysics degree though, so I'm not going to be doing that.
Right. But I was like, that's really cool because he literally showed the math behind Tatooine, and I thought that was really cool.
Oh, it is cool.
But at the same time, I'm like, I already have a world. I don't need to like make the astrophysics work.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's great.
And nobody at my table is going to call me on that. They're not going to be like, well, excuse me, I'm sorry, but my astrophysics degree says that this world can't have this level of resources to it. It's just not going to happen. I need to go.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Bye.
All right, so let's scope this stuff out.
So the most important thing then is figuring out what the scope of your world is. Okay, how much do you actually need? And limit yourself, because like I said, if you stare into the void, you will you can fill that void all day, but it's just really not necessary. So think of the things that are important to where your setting is. Like if you're building in a city, obviously you want to define that city. You may not even necessarily need to map the city, but you kind of want to know what the city's about. Does it have, a shipping district? Does it have a guild district? Does it have like a rich people district or some sort of like a poor people district to it?
Yeah.
Things like that. Where does it kind of sit on your map? Is it a port city? Is it an inland city? Things like that.
Or even look at like your player base, if they've got backgrounds, like literally if they're not even very good, not good, let me rephrase that. Even if they're not experienced role players who come up and give you a 9-page essay of the background of their character, they say through their selected backgrounds, based on the game, it might give you a little bit of history on them. You could say, oh, so you grew up as a blacksmith. Yeah. Okay. Well, can you give me an idea of what the area of your town looked like? And you can incorporate that right into the map. And I mean, like I said, with Urban Shadows, you literally create the world together. And I think that that's kind of a neat way to start things off. I think it gives your players a huge base to start from, as well as if you can use that information to help incorporate.
Yeah, absolutely. Let that
but don't go
inform
beyond
your
it.
world building. Right. And then, after that, you kind of feather out your details. You may want to know things about the surrounding countryside that your city takes place in.
Sure.
If it's coastal, is this the coast of a sea or is this the coast of the ocean?
Yep.
Is it along a river, something like that? You define that.
Sure.
You may want to define what the outside area is. Like, is it in a deeply forested area? Is it nestled into the mountains, etc.? What's kind of around there? Mm-hmm. But after that, your details can start getting real damn sketchy.
Yeah.
Because,
until it becomes necessary. Like if your players have been playing in the area for weeks upon weeks upon weeks, is the weather changing? Mm-hmm. Is it getting colder? Is it getting warmer?
Sure.
Are they traveling north because it's getting drier? Mm-hmm. It's getting into the dry season. Are they helping a caravan leave to another area? Is that a way that you're helping them move from one area to another? Is it a settlement or a resettlement? Are they going, if they're on the sea, are they traveling from colder waters to warmer waters? Those kind of things can have an impact because a lot of times people think of campaigns as very static. I have a world, it has land, it has mountains, it has lakes, it has rivers. They don't necessarily think about how the people are going to travel on that. But yet when you're dealing with a sea-based world or even a space-based, you still have to think about how are they traveling? So what routes are you giving them? What routes are there optional to them? And then how are those going to look and feel? What is the tactileness of those of where they're traveling? and how that's going to get them there.
Yeah,
Because I think that really makes a much bigger difference when you can say, you make your way down to the port and the cold spray of the water hits you. You can see the ships are lightly covered in frost that are coming into port, because as you look out, the bits of ice drift into port as the winter cold starts catching in. You're like, oh, well, I guess I'm not leaving by sea, or if I am, we're leaving now.
Right,
Kind of a thing. So, you're setting that stage as much as you set it going into the woods and saying, the death of the woods as you drift into fall shows that there will be little foraging left. Now you're setting that stage and you're giving them, okay, well, there's going to be less animals and there's going to be less things to forage for, and it's woods, but it's also going to be thinner woods, so it might be able to see a little bit further, things like that. So you're setting those stages, but you have to know what's there and what's beyond those woods.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's, again, scene to scene. You don't need to have every square acre of every forest to know everybody who's going to be in it. Just,
right.
What kind of encounters are going to happen there if you're going to run through it.
And that's I think one of the important things too, is that I think in my experience, and I think in yours as well, I think so, we were discussing this at dinner, is that the players rarely remember that it was 15 miles to get through the woods.
Right.
They just remember that as they were going through those woods, it took them a while to get through. And as they were there, they got jumped by orcs. And
Correct.
remember that time that Thorgar cracked that guy's skull wide open with that crit? That was awesome.
Yep. And then now there are orcs in the woods.
Right.
So now you've got to make that note to say, okay, well, I did an orc thing here. Where did those orcs come from? Did they come from the mountains? Did they crash land in a meteor strike that happened just north of here? And now when they get there, there's going to be meteor holes. Yeah, I'm reading. You got this, Knox. Which would also explain the flying cows, because they were there in the field when the meteor hit, and that's why there's now cow debris everywhere. So, that being said, you have to know what's one step beyond, what's just on the perimeter, and keep track. And consistency is the key.
Exactly.
If you keep
no
it
matter
consistent,
what you're
know
building,
the truth.
Consistency is the key.
That's right.
So, all right, we talked a lot about what you
Thank
don't
you.
need.
Yes, canon.
It's. I've also seen a lot of things online of they're like random generators that give you the exact population of a town.
Oh god.
And the exact population breakdown, 75% human, 12% elves. There are 12 carpenters and 24 priests and 17 cobblers. I have never ever been in a game where that is even remotely important information. More power to the people who cook those things up for you. And every tool you make available online is good, I suppose.
Clearly, you've never done an orbital strike.
Yeah. I guess. I
would
we
say
come around to Exterminatus again. Forward.
That's right. So, I'm saying that can be important, and I think it's great that they give you that information.
Sure,
more power to them, the more information they give you. But I don't think it's necessary for every game.
Yeah.
But they're putting it out there for the fact that it's a well-rounded design. They're giving it to you for all the options that could possibly come up. Yes, Grunthar's store of ultimate finding is there, but also there's a population of 20% elves, and elves in your world are shunned. So, well, that's going to be an interesting kind of racist point to be in for Grunthar,
Yeah.
So
yeah. Maybe there's some things going on there, but
gives you food for thought. I think that's what a lot of the generators do for me. Is that I'll do a random generation, then I'll look at it and I'll go, okay, I'm seeing this ink blot. What is it telling me for my story?
Yeah, that's
And I
actually a
think-
really good way of putting it. They're like Rorschach tests.
And
What do you see in it?
They just help you see something more. They give you another, I guess, point of inspiration. They're bardic inspiration for us storytellers.
Yeah.
They give us just hey, I have no idea what to do this town. Random generator. That didn't give it to me. Random store generator. Oh, I kind of like that guy's name. And there's a potion of that here. Okay, I now know what's going on in this town. These are a bunch of thieves. They're here to murder everyone because actually the town used to be a wonderful mining town, but now it's completely run by a group of disguised thieves who are all under the control of a Illithid. There we go.
There you go.
And now
your story.
I literally just came out of nowhere because a couple generators helped me come up with an idea.
Yep.
So don't let those generators be overwhelming to you. Let them be a muse.
Yeah.
Like you did.
Like Rorschach or some tarot cards.
Yeah.
Just see what you see in them.
Yep.
and then, use it. Or don't. All right, so we talked a lot about what you shouldn't do and what information to discard and what to ignore. But let's talk a little bit about actually, like, if you do want to make the maps, if you do want to make your realistic sort of world and stuff like that, you want to actually start mapping things out. Because I still think it's useful to do. I just don't think you should stress about it.
No.
Like, you should know that there are mountains to the north.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe give them a cool name. But, like, don't worry about, like, what the population of those mountains are or, what monster random encounter is going to be there. Unless the PCs are going through them, So make it realistic enough to make sense, but don't stress out about realism, I think is the general rule of thumb for it. There's a lot of, like, I mean, there are geologists and, I'm sure several other ancillary professions around geologists that I don't know the proper names for, who could tell you all sorts of stuff about how certain terrain features come to be. Mm-hmm. From mountain ranges to vast forests to river basins to, plateaus, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure that they could point out, hundreds of thousands of years worth of geological change that makes them the way that they are and the reason that they are in the places that they are.
By the way, thank you, Sean, for the video. Please watch this later. I know which one this is. I've seen this.
Okay.
It's great. On the same time, it's a lot that you don't need. So, but it's literally what you're talking about right now. It's the hey, let's do the math behind creating a biome, pretty much. And it's like, oh man,
yeah, and it's too much. So I mean, you kind of want to make things, like I said, realistic enough that they make sense. But don't stress about realism.
No.
If you want to have a big desert right in the middle of your jungle because you've got a good reason for it, then you've got a good reason for it. That's great. Put it there. Like, don't worry about whether the fact that there'd be a gigantic dry spot in the middle of a vast, rainforest. Mm-hmm. If there's a reason in your world for it, put it there.
Right.
But keep in mind that consistency is better than realism.
Way better.
Yeah, if you've got a reason for it, put it there because that's what's going to make the interesting story about it.
Correct. I mean, I'll give an example. When I was originally creating my last D&D world, I created whole cloth. I wanted something new, but I needed something that fit and made sense, that combined all the players' needs in it. And so I had to figure out, like, okay, so how am I going to create a world? So I'm like, I'm going to go start with a single continent. I'm not going to worry about the rest of the world. And so I quickly sketched together what I needed, which was I needed a capital for humans, a capital for elves, a capital for orcs, because each of them had certain reasons to be there. Mm-hmm. And then I also needed to have a good reason to have them be separated. And so I created biome zones to do that. Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, I left it all blank. The rest of the page was all blank until it was starting to be discovered by the players. Mm-hmm. And as I went encounter to encounter, I basically filled in those voids.
Yep.
All the way till they found your character, which was kind of an area that I had set up, but then we figured out who you were and that fit right in. Sure. And then did it again when you made your second character. Mm-hmm. And so it never really occurred to me that it was important until much later that I needed to see the whole world because of a change that was coming to the world. Mm-hmm. And I went, the change was going to be there for my final act, which is still going to come up here in a few months. But I needed to see the world. And that's when I actually created a world map. Right. And I had you help me out with that. Yeah. And it wasn't until then that I actually mapped the whole thing out. Mm-hmm. I had it in my head kind of where things were, but it wasn't necessary. It wasn't even important. I didn't even have roads. Because they weren't necessary. Yeah. Getting from place to place was a sketch here and there to you guys to let you know which general direction you were going.
You were like, here's this big city, and it's in the southeast.
Right.
Boom. Okay, cool.
Yep. It's fantastic. This is what it looks like. This is how it feels.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's literally what you ended up with. Uh-huh. So I don't think it's necessary if it's stressing you out as a storyteller that you feel like you need to get it done before everything is good. I think you need to take a step back. I think that's the biggest problem that I have with maps, is that it appears to be easy, but it's not. It's harder to try to fill out the details because you're never done.
Yeah.
It's writing its own story.
There's always minutia. There's always little side stories and plots and societies you can build, and worrying about what's the economic reason for this society to be set up in this little corner of this fort. Like,
yeah,
buddy, unless the PCs are there, it does not matter,
Yeah, so just be consistent and try and have it make some sense. Don't let that sense be hidden. Remember, this is background. The background should just click for the players.
Yep.
The only things that should be mysterious or questioning or anything is the foreground plot. And then those discoveries should be made verbally. Everything else that's done through description or through you're traveling through the lands is fact. Remember that. Because if you ever are giving your players hints and ideas and things through the description of places, you're doing them a disservice because they may not all be listening. And they may gloss over that, no different than if you're reading through a book and, it's talking about certain characteristics until the actor or the player is interacting with it. It's fact. It's just what's there.
Yeah.
It's the truth of what's there.
Good old Robert Jordan catches a lot of flack for that.
He does.
Describing every, thread of a tapestry that's hanging on the wall behind the person who's, important in the scene.
But is he staring at it?
I mean, sometimes, but other times, very much no. I mean, he goes into a lot of detail because it's there,
right?
And it very much.
That's great.
It's a double-edged sword because on one hand, yes, it very much fleshes out the world. It's amazing world building. He has thought about the reason for every detail of every piece of wood trim in the castle in Kyrian.
But does it matter to the physical story?
But it kind of doesn't.
And it shouldn't. That's what I'm saying is you can go into details about how cool the garrison barracks are at your sci-fi military base run by the UMSC, and that these specific firearms are racked perfectly and always armed, and that at this time, you can easily see the LED readouts and some of the firearms are not fully loaded because of the fight they just got back from. Great. That's fact. You're just setting facts. That has nothing to do with the story until one of the players says, I'm going to start looking at the firearms. Okay. Now you can start coming up with details.
Sure.
You can start breaking things down.
And I think it's important too that you can establish certain things like this as world building, but then they just kind of become shorthand after that. You know, like next time you are in these Marine barracks, you can be like, and of course all of their weapons are perfectly racked like you've seen before, and continue on. And they've already got that elaborate description of how meticulous these Marines are about keeping their barracks and all of their equipment in, complete pristine condition. Sure, go into detail about that the first time, but after that, it just becomes an attribute
until it becomes important. Until those players roll a die and say, "Okay, somebody give me a perception check." You roll a die. You notice that 3 of the helmets are missing along the top edge. Why is that important? Well, I think you remember last time it was in perfect order. So that's an important thing to the story versus you listing off that it's just that as a description. Yeah. And like it should be just a normal thing. So case in point, Knox, yes. If you are putting into description over describing something, you might be doing your players a disservice in that they're thinking that that's a red herring.
At a certain point, they're going to get bored too.
Yeah, or they're going to think everything's a red herring.
Yes.
And that's really where you want to step back from that.
Case in point, the chair.
Oh man.
There was this whole thing where in Critical Role, he described this chair that was it seemed out of place in the middle of this room that had been ransacked, and Matthew could not get the players to
stop.
It was just a chair.
It was just a chair. Yeah.
It was just to indicate that maybe someone was sitting in there for a while working.
Right.
He just added as a detail, but they were like, "Wait a minute, hold on. There's a chair in here? Tell us about the chair." And he's like, "It's just a chair." And they're like, "So is it padded, or is there any, do we look at the chair? Does it look like there's a sign of struggle? Was it just thrown in here?" Look,
you ready? You ready?
Just sitting in the middle of the room.
Immediately would have jumped on that. I would have immediately, if the players are interested in a chair, fine. I'll tell a whole damn story about that chair, and it's going to change the whole plot. Why? Because they're interested. They're intrigued. Why not?
No. See, this is, I think.
Are you railroading?
No.
Are you railroading?
It's not railroading. It's staying on track. There's a difference between the two.
All right. Now we're getting into a fundamental problem. You ready? What's track for a player?
All right. So here's my thoughts on this. We only get to play 8 hours every month.
I'm with you.
Okay.
Sure.
I do not want to spend 4 of those hours examining a god's forsaken chair.
Then don't. But don't give them some. If they are interested in an object, give them something from the object. It's a side quest. Do it. Let it run away. It gets them off the chair. But if you give them nothing, they'll keep digging.
Giving them a quest connected to the chair. We're getting so far off topic.
No. This is who cares? Who cares?
I do because there's a couple things I want to talk about before we get to. We gotta get to questions too.
All right,
we gotta get to questions. All right. So, if you're gonna draw maps, I've got some tips for you.
All right, do it.
All right. So,
because I'm terrible at it, so I'm giving it to her.
First thing to think about is like climate zones. Okay. Climate zones are a thing. There are 4 primary climate zones. There's tropical, subtropical, temperate, and cold.
Sure.
Okay, we here in Michigan, we live in a temperate zone. And as you get closer to the equator, you're going to get more tropical. As you get closer to the poles, you're going to get more cold.
And yes.
So, things to consider about where your lands fit within those. Okay. Second thing you want to think about is relative like levels of fertility of the area. Yep. So typically like water sources are going to create fertile environments, hence why like Egyptian cultures out in the desert built along the River Nile.
Yep, makes sense.
Because it was the only place that they could get their shit to grow in the Sahara Desert, So think about that because your societies are going to usually pop up around there and such like that. It's also going to dictate to you where things like forests and swamps are going to be as opposed to things like deserts and badlands.
Right.
Okay. Third thing you're going to think about is topography. Okay. Mountains are going to occur generally in lines. Think about our own Rocky Mountains and Appalachian Mountains.
Yep.
Unless
they're craters.
Well, unless they're craters, but those aren't really unless a crater is literally like the size of a continent. Typically, it's going to be more of a land feature than like something the size of a mountain range that's going to span possibly hundreds of miles.
Right. You can also have erosion-based craters and erosion-based.
Sure.
Like the Grand Canyon is a good example of mountains that aren't really mountains.
Right. Yeah. Your water features will definitely erode things into your features and whatnot like that. But to think about that, how like mountains occur, like your mountain ranges should typically be lines. Water is going to flow downward in elevation. So things are going to come out of high areas like your mountains and flow into low areas and typically into your larger bodies of water until you hit the oceans.
Right.
If you have those in your world. And then you kind of put all 3 of these things together. Your climate, your relative level of like fertility and, what's the word I'm looking for? Foliage, and your topography are all going to inform what biomes are going to be there. Biomes are basically your sort of like archetypes for land. So forests, plains, deserts, swamps, all those sort of things. And so, if you've got a lowlands that has a lot of water in it and it's in a highly fertile area, maybe you have a swamp there. Great. If you have highlands that are very dry, maybe you've got some plateaus, some desert plateaus, like, New Mexico style sort of stuff. I don't know. Be creative.
Yeah. But to that degree, you've also got where people are going to be. So if you've got a military style world where you might have forts and things like that, remember, view is important. Early on in early war, view is everything.
Yep.
If you've got the high ground, you're winning.
Yep.
Because you can see them coming, you can prepare for them better, and things fall really easily. Things don't go up very easily.
Archers get lots of range from elevation.
Yes, exceptional range. And, you can just drop rocks. It has worked for years, Mass hurts.
So, so when you get your your topography all kind of laid out and stuff like that, and you start putting settlements on your map, that's a great thing to keep in mind. Other thing to keep in mind too is natural choke points are great places for military settlements.
Yes. Setting up.
This is the one mountain pass for 50 miles in either direction that you can get through here. So guess what's here? A fucking fort.
Well, you know, 300.
Yeah.
You got to go through this to get past us.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. There's a fort here now. But aside from that, from non-military, from a civilian standpoint, your civilian settlements are typically going to be set up where we're economically or survivably viable. So, for instance, your pioneers went out into the world, however long ago, to set up the settlement, and there's going to be, they found that this was a rich, fertile land. This was the only place that they could build because nothing grew anywhere else. So their survivability depended upon them creating a settlement here.
Yes.
Okay. So if you do have something that makes excellent farmland or something like that, bam, put a settlement in it. Or economically viable. And this means putting things in ports, putting things along rivers, or putting things at major crossroads.
Yeah. You've got your settlements, but usually what follows settlements is commerce. So in the same regard, sometimes settlements were pushed by commerce, where you've got trade people who are trying to set up a settlement so that they can continue to trade, and move farther on, and in that you definitely have that kind of push, which is its own form of, I would say, military style. I mean, you could definitely do that with our own history and say that traders were a major portion of the English takeovers and settlements that they set up. So as they expanded their trade empire, it produced a very large settlement base that came out of that. So think about who's doing this. Why? I mean, people don't just send people for no good reason.
Right.
People don't like owning land for no good reason. They send people to a new land either because A, they don't want them here anymore. They're literally prisoners getting shipped away.
Exiled, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or
and then you get Australia.
Exactly, which can happen. Or you send people to find what's available. Once it's been discovered of there's value here. Now we're going to settle because we want to own that value.
Right.
We want to
own it. We want to control it, and we want to
correct.
bring it back to the motherland or whatever.
Right. We want everyone else here to have it as well.
Yes.
And so that's where you have to think about why. That's where that why for the people, why you're doing it. So then it again, just have it make sense.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
and again, you don't have to create, all your cultures and stuff like that off the bat, but just look at places that you do create on your map and just start thinking okay, well, there's a mountain pass maybe here, maybe there's a village along the river there.
Yeah.
Oh, this little inlet right here would make an interesting place to put a port city.
Right.
And those are all very sound places to put them. So honestly, I think that's about it.
Yeah.
The only other thing I think I've got on here is just talking about, don't be afraid to break the rules with your geography as well.
No doubt.
Do it if it makes sense. So big ways, like I said earlier, having a, huge desert in the middle of a verdant jungle, maybe because there's some sort of necrotic force that lurks beneath the surface of your world that, caused a huge dead spot in the middle of your jungle. I don't know.
I mean, the other thing that you can get at is where you've got world events that have changed. For instance, your world might be a little different, but that might be because we assume that we have our world with a moon that orbits it, and that's why we have what we have. There's nothing to say that your world couldn't have been more screwed up, and you've actually got an asteroid belt around it, a disk, and that disk changes the entire topography of what you think is normal. Yep. Places where it's in shade 24/7 is actually frozen, and that's not even at the equator, because again, that disk would cover a huge section, right?
Yeah.
So there might be a 50-mile swath that's literally ice in between two jungles because the sun beats right through, and maybe you've got two suns. So you have, 28 hours of sunlight and then darkness, partial darkness, like red darkness for a while, and then golden darkness for another while, so you have these different settings that can produce very different biomes. But again, let them make sense for why they're like that.
Yep.
So
you can do smaller, more stylistic changes. So take a normal biome, like a forest, and make it crystal trees.
sure.
Or mountains that reach so high that like large chunks of them literally float because they're in the upper atmosphere or something. I don't know. Whatever. You can do whatever you want.
The atmosphere is that thing. Wow, that'd be interesting. Or
No,
that
I know it's not scientifically sound,
well,
but
no, but also scientifically sound isn't like half the world got chewed away.
yeah.
So you're on this weird orbital axis with chunks of the Earth that are literally just
floating.
not there.
Yep.
And the other side of the Earth seems to be doing okay, but because of that gravitational shift, now you have this odd atmosphere where it's actually thinner in certain areas and totally frozen plains at a certain altitude.
Yep.
Yeah, I could totally see it where there's no oxygen even.
And the last thing is, just various variations on your archetypical biomes.
Yeah.
So instead of a desert, salt flats. Instead of a jungle, or instead of a forest, just make it a jungle. Maybe it's a rainforest. Instead of swamps, make them sulfurous hot springs. Something a little more rare with a little more pizzazz, but still not out of the realm of possibility. I think that's really all I've got to say on geography. Go out there and do your best.
Yeah, just have fun with it.
Just have fun. Because at the end of the day, your players are going to remember the stories they told in the land
Exactly.
Far more than they're going to remember the map.
All right, questions?
Yeah, let's do
Okay,
some
first things
questions,
off,
man.
Illy May, Mad Elf, we'll be back to your questions, we promise.
Next week.
Next week, we're going to hit those.
Because they are history questions, and oh ho ho, are we going to talk about history?
Yes. All right. But we do have other questions. So, Overwatch. The Dragons of Dragonlance, the powers of Chaos and Warhammer, White Walkers in Song of Ice and Fire. Is there one standout supernatural something that really helps to define a particular setting? Have you used something like that in your own campaign?
Ooh. I mean, I think probably my go-to answer, both because I'm a huge fangirl and because I'm currently running an Elder Scrolls game right now, is going to be the Daedra.
Okay.
I really like the Daedra. I find them intriguing. I find the whole cosmology of the Elder Scrolls universe very intriguing. And I think I like having like meddlesome gods that lurk on the outskirts of our world, constantly trying to push their own archetype into mortal society because they're bored. And they like toying with us, and some of them don't like the fact that they were like locked out of, being able to interact with us. So
Interesting. Okay. I liked and disliked all at the same time what I did in my D&D game with the orbs of power.
Oh yeah,
I had created magical orbs that effectively were these crystals.
Nexuses
condensed.
of energy.
Yeah, they were just of a certain type, whether it was aberration
Nexi?
or conjuration
Nexes?
or probably one of those. And basically, when you were near one, the magic potential of that type became verdantly strong. The big one was orbs of law were the big ones that I pushed in, which was that anything being done in a lawful way or by ways of law were almost enforced. So people in towns basically just followed the law, whatever the law was, because it was the lawful thing to do. They were impassioned to do it. They didn't realize it. But outside of that, you had these justicars who would kind of roam the roads, like almost like sheriffs, and help people like, oh, you're getting near the city, that's this town, these are the laws within that town, be aware of it. And really what they were doing was they were prepping you for that when you got in there, you knew what was lawfully right to do. The thing was, there were other orbs that they didn't really tell people about, like orbs of conjuration and abjuration and evocation, which definitely had other power sets aligned to them, and that caused a lot of turmoil in the world.
I need to get my hands on an orb of evocation for
Yes,
reasons.
It's unknown. So yeah, that was one of the things that I liked, but at the same time, it made it challenging. But I basically set the rules for it very simple and stuck to those rules as much as I could. And the players did use them a few times to some serious destruction. So
Whoopsie.
Exactly. But no, I like a lot of different worlds for a lot of different reasons. I think the one that sticks out the most for me in a setting is Shadowrun, and I think it's the Megacorps.
Yeah, the Megacorps are very cool.
It's such a neat design, and it's a simple thing that's just an extrapolation of our own world, but it carries so much for that setting, so much, and it changed so much in that setting. Because without them in that setting, if the rules and what they weren't how they interact, and there would be no need for a Johnson.
Yeah.
You'd have a very different situation.
Yeah.
So they create the world in such a hard way, but leave so much available to play with. So that's one of the things I really like. I really like that. So, all right, we got more.
All right, so Knox in a Box asks...
Oh my God, that's a long question.
This is a bit of a long question.
Right,
It says,
thanks for writing.
a storyteller's natural impulse is to build a flawless system for their world, which aren't going to be perfect. They will be flawed, which your players will recognize and possibly expect. The question is, do we let the world have its flaws naturally, or should we design them intentionally in an effort to create realism by leaving room for systems to fail, by not being so definite and more loose or gray? Basically, should the world system focus more on potential rather than actuality? For example, perhaps is Hogwarts Sorting Hat house characteristic system? Oh, so kind of like how in Harry Potter's world there are only 4 types of kids: brave, ambitious, smart, and other.
Well, I mean, and hungry? Is that
Hungry, I guess, yeah.
friendly?
Friendly?
Helpful?
I'm not sure.
But I mean, but at the same time, that definition is loose. It's meant to be flawed.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really look at that, there were definitely people in each one of the houses that were jerks. There were definitely odd, helpful people in houses that you didn't necessarily think, but they were doing it in a cunning way. So, yes, it's a flawed system, but I wouldn't say it's flawed by design. It's just flawed in the way that it was built.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, the world opened itself up to its own flaws because you had the question came up like, why are kids even taking this crap from this type of a school when they're clearly smarter and should be able to leave? And sure shit, kids will. And they did. The Weasley brothers just left school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And were destructive about it. So again, I think you set the world without the idea of flaws, but you have to do it from the perspective of your world builders. So, for instance, if there's a king and his whole thing is to get resources from this area and hold it, it's going to be very military strong. He's not going to be thinking about the economy. And your players may exploit that. They may do something silly. They may just join his guard, or convince him that they can defend things better, and then, step off to the side and be like, yeah, we said we were going to defend this, but in fact, we're not.
Right.
And
we're bandits now.
We're bandits, actually, and we just stole all your shit. Oh my God, leverage kind of crap.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't think that you need to set up any flaws. The world will be flawed on its own, but I think those flaws are inherent in everyone's design.
I mean, as usual, I think I'm probably becoming known for this quote. I'm of two minds about it.
That's fine.
I think on one hand, I think there's going to be flaws. They're just going to come out during gameplay. Like Rob was just talking about.
Yep.
But at the same time, I mean, I have outright designed flaws into things.
Sure.
Because it makes for a dramatic story. People aren't perfect. People aren't going to create perfect systems.
But if it's important to the story, I think definitely yes.
Yeah, and or not even necessarily that it's important to the story, but that it's a world building aspect that could create story.
Okay.
It's not story in and of itself.
Sure.
It's just that this is a theocratic society that heavily focuses on worshiping this one god in this one way to the exclusion of all others. And that has brought them, an economic downturn because their faith does not allow them to do this one particular thing, which would be very advantageous for them, but they rebuke it.
Right.
That's obviously a flaw.
Right.
It's an ingrained inflexibility that is causing harm to their society. And it's not necessarily a story because there's not players in it. There's not an outcome to it. It's just a thing that exists. This society is built this way.
Sure.
Do with it what you want. That's just how the pieces are set on the board. From there, you could have story that emerges if your players begin to interact with it. If they begin to try to push society in one way or another, they're going to see the inflexibility as people push back on them, as you're trying to tell me to turn against my god or whatever. Maybe they do end up convincing them to change their ways, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. Whatever. You can come up with whatever stories you want, but I think I'm a big believer that good stories come from flaws. Rob has seen several of my characters in the past across several game systems, and that's usually where I start building my characters, is with flaws.
Oh, no, I think flaws in characters are a great idea.
I usually say my character fits this archetype, but they're messed up in this way.
Right.
And that's going to be my struggle.
Okay.
And for instance, Ravana, we were just talking about your world and the mountains and stuff that you put in there. My character in that world is a mountain guide and a frost wizard, essentially.
Yep.
And she's just an old country. She's a young country girl, and she sees things very, very black and white. But that's her flaw.
Yeah.
I know that. I know the fact that Ravana sees things in a very black and white manner. There's only good and only evil. All undead fall into the evil thing. So if you're talking to a ghost, you're probably colluding with evil.
Okay.
That's just her
Simple
outlook
enough.
on life,
That's
because
simple.
she learned that undead were bad.
Yeah, no, that I think that flaws for characters do a great job. I think that to continue with what you're saying, when you're doing it in world building, keep it simple. Not everyone's a genius in world building.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I would say that most people are not heroic and are not smart enough to do really smart to do unique and perfect things. And I think some people who get too smart tend to lose sight. They get blinders.
Yeah.
They get smart to an area, funny enough, I'll throw this in before we move on.
Okay.
I was watching a video of Everyday Astronaut, the guy who does Everyday Astronaut, talking to Elon Musk. And one of the things that he was talking about with the new spacecraft was that he worked on helping them simplify. Because you can, if you don't ask the question why I need to follow the specification, you might not ever fix you might not be able to find a better solution. Because it's everybody like, I'm building this nut and this is the specification. So you have to build a screw that fits this nut. And then that guy's, okay, well, this bolt hole needs to be this big because this is the size of the screw going through it. And that means this plate has to be this thick because this, So you go back to the first guy, well, why did you build a nut to that specification? Oh, it's what we had available. And you just literally designed everything based on that first nut.
Because it was just completely
And probably
arbitrary.
there's some guy at the far end who's trying to make sure everything works perfectly and is literally doing engineering and super math and everything to get the weight down. And it's taking him hours to design this flawless thing. And then then everybody just says, no, scrap it. That's too challenging. Let's not do it that way. Let's do it this way. And so they literally did that. They built that huge carbon fiber thing to be able to build a whole carbon fiber rocket. And they're like, whoa, why are we doing this? Literally, every time we do this, we have to redesign another thing. Can we do this out of stainless steel? Yeah. Is stainless steel cheaper? Yeah. Can we just use stainless steel? Oh, yeah, it's got great properties. Let's just go stainless steel then. So we're just going to scrap all that design work we did. Why? Because it's the smart thing to do. Sometimes you have to do that. And so it takes a lot of intelligence, group intelligence, to watch that process and stop it and fix it. And that doesn't happen most times.
Yeah.
Most times it is a dumb thing that happens. We need to block off this dam, get a bunch of boulders. We're going to put this all in here. We'll use some mortar. We'll lock it in. That should take care of everything. Did anybody remember that we have tremors every summer? No.
No.
Exactly. So just remember that tends to be, designed by committee. So.
Yeah. And just to answer your question, Knox, he writes, my concern is crossing every T and dotting every I makes the world too perfect and unrealistic. So don't try to build the perfect system. Yeah, you're not going to be able to.
No.
You're one person and you're trying to write a whole story, and this thing is your systems are just parts of it. So you're going to have flaws. Allow yourself to have flaws.
Sure.
Forgive yourself for them right now, and just try to roll with them and improv around them.
Yep.
Come up for reasons why their flaws are there, and tell your story around them. It'll make for interesting storytelling.
I like it. I like it. All right, Technolich. When it comes to starting from scratch with geography, do you find it more valuable to start with larger items, then move towards specifics, or start with well-defined nugget and build into it? Both.
Yeah, you can make an argument for either.
Both.
Honestly, it really depends on what type of story you're trying to tell.
Yeah, it also, I guess for me, if I'm starting, I rarely start from a geographical sense in my headspace, but now that I think about it more so, it's chicken or egg for me. Like, what's my story?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll come up this time it's going to be romance. Sometimes I'm thinking about the world. And so I might draft some ideas about the world, but everything is going to be a light sketch. Everything. And I will erase and rebuild and do things multiple times. But more of the times than not, everything will be very blurry beyond what the players are going to see for the first, I would say, 5 sessions. Yeah, I will think about 5 sessions out. If they literally, this session did this, and then immediately follow the train to this session, then immediately follow the train to this session, and then immediately, how far will they go? What will they see? What will they need to field and interact with?
So
and at that
you
point,
start with a well-defined nugget and then build around it. So
I would say
we're starting in this town, so I'm going to define the hell out of this town. And then 5 game sessions later, when they're like, we're going to leave the town. Okay, well, now I need to figure out what's out there.
Kind of. And if I'm going to do the world building, I'm going to say, do you see mountains from where you're at? Do you feel cold? Things like that. Like but all of that is going to be on a piece of scratch paper made in pencil with just little jots. Like, okay, there's some mountains up here. There's some of this over here. And a lot of that will be filled on by when my players are creating their characters. Okay, where are they from? What do they know? And then that's all gray light sketches. Unless everybody was born and raised in that town, I need to have gray sketches everywhere else to say this is what we know in somewhat.
I've done it both ways.
Yeah.
I've my own homebrew campaign was started off with geography. I kind of sketched in the whole world and then kind of refined that down to, okay, what are the kingdom boundaries around here? And then, okay, what do each one of these kingdoms do? And what do they, how do they interact with each other and stuff like that? Okay, now where's the capital city and where are the societies and stuff like that? I've done it that way. And I think it was moderately successful, at least as a first sort of experiment. But I think nowadays, I tend to start with a well-defined nugget and build out from there. So I kind of agree with Rob. It really depends on the story you're telling.
Right. All right. Now we're back to Knox.
And we're back to Knox.
Uh-oh. My tablet's doing crazy things. All right, here we go. Is there a preferred world-building order that best helps the creation of your geography, or does that depend on your story you're trying to tell? For example, you're writing a pantheon first. If you're going to tell stories of how God's shaped or where believed shaped the land, or maybe you were writing history first to explain the world that was shaped by centuries of events perpetrated by life forms, trends, magics of the world. Really all depends.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, if you're planning on building an epic campaign that's made up of multiple stories, you want a world. And I think in that sense, you need history, you need other things. And I think it's based upon your muse.
Yeah.
Like what's driving you about that story is going to determine where your start point. So I don't think a who, what, when, where, or why has a specific start point. I think it's up to you what your muse point is. Which one of those is your muse? Are you really concerned about the people right now? Like, what are the people doing? There's this king, and he's in this control. Okay, now I've got my start point, and literally the ripples move out from there. Okay, where is this king? How is this king interacting?
Starting with Romeo and Juliet, but what if Montague and Capulet were warlords?
Exactly.
That each owned half of a kingdom. What would that do to the landscape? Okay, now let's come up with the reasons for that happening. and what does the landscape look like, and,
Right.
you know, et cetera, et cetera. You radiate out from that.
Yeah.
So you're starting with your who.
Yeah.
You know?
Whereas I will give you a different one in Savage World that Chris used. He started from the moon broke.
Yeah.
Here's the world.
Yeah.
The world as we know it today, contemporary. The moon was shattered. Oh, crap. What did that do to our planet? And it changed everything. And from that, he remolded the world and said, okay, well, there's this type of race of this and this type of race of this, and this is why, and these are the things here, and these are gods. You know, what's a god? Maybe it's an AI. Don't know. You know? And so all of these things are parts of his world that was created post-apocalypse. So the important part in his story for world building, or probably a muse to that world building, is the apocalyptic event. And that's what changed everything. So I think it's about your muse point, and then go from your muse and ripple out from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no wrong way to do it. But I definitely think that's a more fun way, and you'll definitely ripple back in. Changes will be made.
Sure.
In the world building, and then, you know, setting, world building, story, or story, world building, setting, or story, setting, world building. I mean, that's all different as well. So, you know, but that gets into a much deeper discussion about how you feel about that center point, what started this whole thing.
Right. And keeping in mind too, you know, your world building may take a backseat to everything else. You know, I mean, there's some people who sketch out elaborate whole worlds with, you know, maps and everything mapped out before they ever ask players to sit at their table and play in that world.
You know what they're called? Wizards
Writers
of the Coast.
Yeah. Well, basically.
I mean, seriously.
But you know, but there are people who do that.
Yeah.
And that's great. It's certainly a tack you can take.
Yeah.
But there are also, you know, like I said, like Dungeon World tells you, leaves blank spots on the map. World building is specifically in Dungeon World put in the back seat. It's like, no, that's literally the last step. Like, first you come up with a story, second we make characters to put in that story, third we figure out where that story takes place, and we also kind of figure that out along the way from the seat of our pants with the input of our players.
Right.
So, you know, depends on your setting, depends on your muse point. Yeah, just you could really do it a lot of different ways.
Yeah. So either way, have fun with it. So next week's topic is history. And
I almost feel like it's going to be kind of the same sort of discussion.
yeah,
It's going to be less about what you need to write and more about what you don't need to write.
yeah. And so I kind of want some direction out of this from the people who are listening. So if you're listening to us live, thank you so much. Think about some questions you want to throw. Don't write them up there yet, because I want to put a marker in our chat so that I know where our break point is for this. But get some ideas flowing about what things about history, what questions you have about history. We have some out there, which we are going to answer.
We've put you off for like 3 weeks.
We put you off for 3 weeks. Your questions will be answered in the
We love
story.
you. We see you. You are so valid.
You are part of this world. You're part of our history. This will happen. But throw some questions at it, because we kind of need a direction, because there's a lot that we could talk about, and there's so much that I started watching and I literally had to stop. Because lore is such a challenging part of history, and it is its own thing in history.
It really is.
So, and then you have stuff like pre-existing worlds where you have to figure out where you are. 7th Sea does a good job of that, where it's like, you're at this point in time when you play.
Yep.
You work, and then when you're done and you start a new one, you come back to that point.
Aberrant,
That's where you
Adventure, Trinity, all the Aeonverse games, they do the exact same thing. Like, Aberrant takes place here.
Yeah.
Adventure is 1928.
Yeah.
Period.
Right.
You know.
But you things like Forgotten Realms or Faerun or
Elder Scrolls.
Elder
you know
Scrolls.
How long it took us to how long it took me to figure out just where I wanted to set our game chronologically, let alone physically.
No, I'm with you. There's just so much.
Yeah.
So anytime when you've got massive lore, you start running those risks. So we'll definitely get into it, but figure out what kind of questions you really want to ask about history. And we may not get a lot, and if we don't, we're going to have some fun with it. But
yeah, absolutely.
And then we've got ideas for our next, few shows. But we'll get to those. I think we're going to have some fun. I think you guys will enjoy it. And we do plan on doing something for Halloween. We'll have some fun with that too. So, all right. So once we've got that, I think we're just about ready, Kate. I think we've got like 1 to 2 minutes. Wow,
1 to 2 minutes.
Geez. All right. Anybody got a quick question on the live chat show? Do it.
Do it.
You got like a minute.
Yeah.
Come on, Knox.
You're on the spot.
What do we got? Overwatch. Come on, hit me with something. Anything.
Knox in a box is typing.
Oh,
Heatsink is typing.
Why though?
Why?
Oh, nice. We see this. All right, what do we got? Because always.
For treats.
That's right. Come on now. You got to have something, guys. Come on. Give us something. Anything. This is why live chat is available. Dead air. It's terrible.
No.
Don't make me do ASMR.
I see everybody typing.
I see. It's they're typing too much. That's the problem.
We kind of put them on the spot.
We totally did. We totally should have like preempted this with something. You guys are losing your time. Oh.
If Mr. Goodwrench was a tool, what type of tool would he be?
Well, not just a wrench, because he's a good wrench.
Miter saw. I'm sorry. We were looking for miter saw.
Too slow.
Yeah.
Where do you guys like dropping characters and shit? Where do I?
Where?
I
guess where.
I usually do towns.
Yeah, I usually do towns. I usually do major cities.
But I'm starting to change my mind on that, because I think I might start doing more chaotic settings, where you're like, you find yourself on the edge of a crag. You're fighting your way up it to ogres who are above you, while being chased by something south of you.
Why though?
Go.
Why though?
So, next to volcanoes,
yes.
holding your guest NPC. There you go.
Yes. Handling guest NPCs. That's
guest
a big
PCs.
topic.
That's a whole thing. We'll do that.
Yeah,
all right, go run us. All right, we're running out of here.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave. You can find us on Instagram as well at @ST_conclave. And our Discord link is not only up pinned tweet on our Twitter feed, but it's also in each one of our episode descriptions on your favorite podcast software. So go ahead and click on that. Join us in the Discord, and please, by all means, shoot us some questions on there. We love having this sort of discussion with our listeners
and our Patreon members, like Knox in the Box, who just chatted with us through the whole show, along with Overwatch and everyone else. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Guy Frog, who we found. He's a cool guy. We'll put up his link so you can find his music too. Outro music, which you're listening to now, is Only in Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. Carrie Washington is the actual artist there. You can find her on freemusicarchive.org. We record at Podcast Detroit. Find them at podcastdetroit.com or at Podcast Detroit on Twitter. Our engineers, Kate, thank you so much.
Thank you. We love you, Kate. And our families, Vicky and Sean, thank you so much for supporting us and putting up with us as we do this Wednesday night after Wednesday night. All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables throughout the years, and you, our listeners, we love you. Thank you.
Good night, guys.